Some of my favourite tools in Illustrator are the perspective drawing tools. Now, perspective drawing is a technique used by artists to create a feeling of depth in their drawings. Here we have a flat plane, it's a chessboard, and I've placed it into a scene where we imagine a horizon line. Now, the horizon line in a drawing is your eye level, basically. That's what you perceive as being your eye level. And we'll have a look at what that means in the next couple of steps. Now, you don't need to follow along with me. I've opened a few images just to illustrate a point, but I will get you to follow along once we've explained the whole principle of perspective. Now, if I click on here, I can choose the next image, which is this one. And if you imagine I've tilted this chessboard on the y-axis, which measures distance from top to bottom, you'll notice that what happens is the lines going from this image converge towards a point on the horizon. And that's known as the vanishing point. And you'll see that all the lines of the chessboard converge towards that point. And by using this as a guide, we can create a feeling of depth. Now let's go to the next image. Let's have a look at this image of a beach. If you imagine this is a beach, you're looking at it, this is your eye line. And it's also called the horizon. And when you look at the horizon, that's where you stop seeing the ground, if you like, and you start seeing the sky. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the ground, it could be the sea, it could be a whole heap of trees in the distance or something like that, or hills. But that is the horizon, where the ground meets the sky. Now, if we click on this again, and we add some people to this scene, notice that if I place people in the scene and I place their eye level at the horizon line, it will appear believable. Okay, so it appears to me that they're the same height as I am, that I'm standing at the same level as they are. And that's what happens when you place people into a scene with their eye line matching the horizon line. But what happens if I make an adjustment to that? So if I go to adult view here, what I've done is I've scaled down this person. And because I've scaled them down, they look now like a child. But it looks like I'm the same height as the adult, so I'm an adult and I'm looking at another adult with a child. Now, if I go back to here and I choose instead a small child, and let's just zoom out a bit so we can see that, notice that I've brought the horizon line down to the child's point of view. And now I feel like I'm a small child looking at another small child and an adult. I feel like I'm looking up at this adult. And that's because this is the horizon line and that's the same as the child's. So I'm either kneeling or the same height as the child. And then let's have a look at this one. This one, all I've done is moved that character up. I haven't made them a different size. And because I've matched the eye line of both characters, it makes it look as if that person is the same height as this person and the same height as me. They're just standing further away. So you'll see by taking advantage of these converging lines, we can start to make it look as if we have depth in the shot. So if you have a look at this, there are converging lines going from here to the horizon line. So this is the kind of phenomenon that we try and recreate in drawing. And when you're just drawing without any knowledge of perspective, it can be quite difficult. So Illustrator provides a guide for you to help you. So what we're going to do now is open Perspective Drawing Start, which is just an empty document. And what I want you to do is go down here to the Tool panel and click on the Perspective Grid tool. And this is the Perspective Grid. I'm also going to close this little panel here just to give us a bit more space. And you'll notice it places a grid onto my document. And this document, or this grid rather, has these little widgets that I can choose to control the grid. So I can make it bigger or smaller by pulling this one up or down. Okay, I can also adjust the horizon line, so I can decide how high the horizon line is. So am I looking down at a building or am I looking up at a building? If I move the horizon line down, it feels like I'm looking up at a very tall building, especially if I just adjust the size of the grid a little bit. If I pull the horizon up, it starts to feel like I'm on top of another building looking down at this one. So you'll see by adjusting the horizon line, I can determine the height of the building or other elements within my 3D scene, or my perspective scene, I should say. Now you can also move the whole grid. So if I want the building to be over here somewhere in my drawing, I can move it over there and then decide on the horizon line. And that gives me a little bit more space to draw down here. Now let's bring it back over into the centre. At any time, if you want to reset the grid, you can go to View and down to Perspective Grid. And this is a 2-point perspective, so if you go into 2-point perspective and choose 2P normal view, it will reset the grid to where it was. So if you get lost, just reset it. Then we have options for extending the grid, and you'll notice that actually nothing's happening when I try and extend it this way. We'll talk about that in a second, but if you want to, you can trim the grid in, and we'll have a look at how to extend it in a little while. Now you also have these settings here, these widgets here. This one allows me to increase the size of the pieces of the grid, and once I've done that, I can extend it further. Bit of a strange one, that one, but if you make the grid size bigger, you can extend it further. So that allows you to do that, so we can create a very long building. Now, these things here are the vanishing points, and this is 2-point perspective, so we have 2 vanishing points. So we can make our view more extreme by stretching out these vanishing points. And again, I could extend the height of the building up here. And if we zoom out, using Command- on the keyboard, we can start to create these really amazing, dramatic kind of views. Now, we also have another couple of widgets. This one here will pull up the bottom of the building to the horizon line. So we now look like we're kind of underground looking up at the building, which is a bit odd, but you can adjust that if you want to. So lots and lots of controls in here for adjusting all of the grid options. Now we also have planar widgets here, which allow you to extend planes out from the original building. So I tend to use these. This can be a bit confusing, but what I tend to use these for, and you'll see me use them in later movies, is once I've drawn an initial building, I may then want to draw a building over here and create another road. So I'll use that to create a building on the other side of the street, or an opposite wall, something like that. So you can extend these at any time. Now, as I said, at any time you can reset this grid, and it starts to get a bit confusing at this point. So I'm going to go into my View Perspective Grid and show you that there are other perspective grids. So we have a 1-point perspective, which creates this kind of effect, which is great for creating like railroad tracks and things like that. If you want a railroad track going off into the distance, you can adjust your perspective grid. And again, you have a ground line and a horizon line that you can adjust. And all the same widgets allow you to make adjustments, bring the ground line up to the horizon, pull it down further. And then we have a 3-point perspective grid, which is pretty amazing. It gives us these really dramatic, Marvel-like perspectives. And this is the one that we're going to use in the exercises that we're going to go through. So there we can look as if we're really looking down on a very, very tall building. And I can extend that and make a really deep skyscraper by pulling this down and extending my grid that way. So you see, you can create just the most amazing dramatic perspectives using the Perspective Grid tool. So once you've had a little play with it, and again, I can adjust the vanishing points of that. So we have 3 vanishing points. So there's 2 vanishing points on the horizon line, and then we have a 3rd vanishing point down here. So you can even create weird angles like that, as if you're kind of sitting in a helicopter or something, looking down at the building. So create really extreme perspectives. So we'll have a look at how to use these in the next movie, but that's a little introduction to this perspective grid and perspective drawing.